I used to think time was something you could save, like money, put it aside, use it later when things were quieter, when work slowed down, when life made more sense. That belief cost me my marriage. Not all at once, not in a dramatic way, just slowly, quietly, over years. I kept telling my wife the same thing, over and over. Not now. Let's do it later. We've got time. And the worst part is, I wasn't lying. I really believed it. It wasn't until the doctor sat across from us, cleared his throat, and said the word cancer that I understood how wrong I'd been. By then, all the things I thought we could do someday were still sitting there, untouched, waiting. And suddenly, time wasn't something I had anymore. I'm 68 now, and I'm telling you this because I don't want this memory to die with me. For most of my life, I thought I was a good husband. Not great, not romantic in the movie sense, but solid, dependable. The kind of man people don't worry about. I showed up, I worked hard, I paid the bills on time, I didn't run around, I didn't disappear. I came home every night. I thought that counted for something. I really did. If you'd asked me back then how my marriage was, I would have said, we're fine. And I would have meant it. No yelling, no slammed doors, no long, ugly fights. Just two people who knew each other well enough to stay out of trouble. I mistook peace for closeness. I see that now. But back then, no. Back then, I thought this was what long marriages turned into. Less talking, less curiosity, more routine. I told myself that was maturity, stability. Growing up, my wife never complained loudly. That's part of what fooled me. She wasn't dramatic. She didn't cry to make a point. She'd just suggest things, casually, almost carefully, a walk after dinner, a short weekend trip, sitting together instead of me turning on the television. Little things, ordinary things. And I'd answer the same way every time. Not tonight. I'm tired. Maybe next month. Let's wait until things calm down. I always had a reason, and the reasons sounded reasonable. Work was stressful. Money mattered. The future needed planning. I told myself I was being responsible. I never thought of myself as someone who was neglecting his wife. That word felt too harsh. Neglect sounded intentional, like you had to mean it. I didn't mean it. I loved her. I just postponed her. That's a strange thing to admit. Even now, it sits wrong in my mouth. I thought love was something you secured early and then maintained by not screwing it up. Don't cheat. Don't leave. Don't hurt each other. I thought if I avoided the big mistakes, the rest would take care of itself. I didn't realize love needs attention the way a fire needs oxygen. Not all at once. Just regularly, quietly, without skipping too many days. Looking back, I can see the moments where she was reaching for me. Not desperately, not angrily, just checking if I was still there with her. And I kept giving her the same answer. Later. I wasn't cruel. That's what makes this harder. I was comfortable. And comfortable men don't notice when they're slowly becoming absent. I thought I had time to become better, more present, more interested. I assumed that version of me would show up eventually. I didn't know time was already slipping past us while I was waiting to feel ready. I can still hear the way she asked. That's the part that stays with me. Not what she asked for, but how she asked. It was never a demand, never a complaint. More like she was testing the ground, seeing if it was safe to want something out loud. Sometimes it was as simple as, do you want to take a walk with me after dinner? Not exercise, not a plan, just a walk around the block. 10, 15 minutes. I'd glance at the clock, feel the weight of the day sitting on my shoulders, and say, Maybe tomorrow. I'm wiped. Tomorrow almost never came. Other times she'd mention a weekend trip. Nothing fancy. A small town a couple of hours away. Somewhere quiet. She'd say, "We don't have to do much. Just get away." I'd nod, say, "It sounded nice," then start listing reasons. Work deadlines, the cost, the timing, always the timing. "There's no rush," I'd say. "We can do it later." She'd smile at that, a polite smile, not disappointed enough to argue, just accepting. At least that's what I thought it was at the time. There were evenings when she'd sit at the kitchen table while I watched television in the other room. She'd talk about her day, about someone she ran into, about a thought she'd had, and I'd answer, but not really look at her. My eyes stayed on the screen. I told myself I was listening, multitasking. Another lie I didn't know was a lie yet. Every now and then, she'd turn the TV off and say, "Can we just sit for a bit? No agenda, no serious talk announced, just sitting." And I'd feel this quiet irritation rise up in me, not at her, at the interruption, at the feeling that my rest was being disturbed. I hate admitting that. Even now, I'd say yes sometimes, enough to feel like I wasn't completely failing, but more often than not, I'd say, "In a minute." And then that minute stretched and stretched until she'd go to bed alone. She also used to suggest things that felt unnecessary to me. Taking a class together, learning something new, pottery. Once, I laughed at that. Not cruelly, just surprised. "What for?" I asked. She shrugged and said, "Just to do something together." I didn't see the point. That was the problem. If something didn't have a clear purpose, I didn't give it much value. I thought shared history was enough. Decades together should have covered that, right? I didn't understand that she wasn't asking for activities. She was asking for access. And every time I said later, I closed that door a little more. What I didn't notice was when she stopped asking as often. It didn't happen overnight. There was no announcement, no final attempt, just a gradual, quiet, fewer suggestions, less reaching, more time spent doing her own things, reading, calling friends, going places without me. I told myself this was healthy. Independence, space. That's what people say you're supposed to want after years together. But if I'm honest, part of me felt relieved. Relieved that I didn't have to keep choosing, that my default could be enough. I didn't see that every later landed somewhere. It landed on her patience, on her hope, on whatever expectation she still had that I'd eventually turn toward her fully. I thought I was buying time. What I was really doing was spending it, carelessly, without checking the balance. If she'd yelled, maybe I would have paid attention sooner. If she'd accused me or threatened to leave, maybe fear would have snapped me awake. But she didn't do any of that. She loved quietly, and I failed quietly in return. By the time I noticed the distance between us, it felt normal, like this was just how things were now. Two people moving through the same house on slightly different paths. I told myself we'd reconnect when things slowed down. I didn't know things were already slowing down in a way I couldn't outrun. The day we found out, it didn't feel real, not at first. We were sitting in a small room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. The kind of room where nothing good ever gets said. But you don't know that yet when you walk in. The doctor was kind, too kind. He spoke slowly, carefully, like he was stepping around something fragile on the floor. I remember watching my wife's hands more than his face. She had them folded in her lap, fingers interlaced, perfectly still. That wasn't like her. She usually moved when she talked, tapped the table, touched my arm. That day, she didn't move at all. When he said the words liver cancer, my first thought wasn't fear. It was confusion, like he'd made a mistake, picked up the wrong chart, said the wrong name. I almost corrected him. That's how disconnected it felt. Then he kept talking. Stages, options, words that floated past me without landing. I nodded at the right moments, asked a question or two, practical ones. That's my instinct. Fix it, organize it, figure out the next step. But my wife was quiet. At one point, I looked over at her, expecting to see tears, or anger, or something I could recognize. Instead, she looked smaller, not physically, just pulled inward, like someone had turned the volume down on her from the inside. That's when it hit me. Not all at once, more like a slow pressure in my chest, the kind that makes it hard to breathe, but you don't realize why at first. Time. This was about time. Suddenly, all those later conversations came rushing back. Not in order, just flashes. Her standing in the doorway asking if I wanted to go somewhere. Her voice in the kitchen suggesting something small. Me brushing it off without thinking. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I hesitated. That pause still embarrasses me. I don't know why I waited. Maybe part of me was still pretending this wasn't happening. When I finally did take her hand, she squeezed once, just once, then let go. On the drive home, she stared out the window. I kept talking about doctors, about second opinions, about how we'd handle this. I was already in problem solving mode, clinging to the idea that if I stayed busy enough, I wouldn't have to feel what was coming. She didn't interrupt me. She just listened. That night, after dinner, she said something quietly, almost like she didn't want to disturb the air. I guess we won't be going to Scotland. I laughed. A short, stupid laugh. Of course we will, I said. We'll do everything. We've got time. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and there was no anger in her eyes. That's what undid me. Just a kind of tired understanding, like she'd already accepted something I was still arguing with. We'll see, she said. That was the first time I felt fear. Not fear of losing her, fear of realizing how much I'd already lost without noticing. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, replaying years in my head, trying to figure out when I'd convinced myself that time was guaranteed, when I'd decided urgency was optional. I didn't sleep much after that, and when I did, I dreamed of calendars with pages tearing themselves away faster than I could grab them. For the first time in my life, I understood something I wish I'd learned sooner. Time doesn't warn you when it's about to stop being generous. After that day, something in me flipped, almost violently. I stopped saying later. I stopped hesitating. I became the man she'd been asking me to be for years, almost overnight. I said yes to everything. Trips, walks, conversations. All of it. I wanted to make up for lost time, as if time was something you could bargain with once you realized its value. I remember standing in the kitchen one morning, making coffee, telling her we should plan that Scotland trip. I was already talking about routes and hotels, like enthusiasm alone could reverse biology. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Let's see how I'm feeling, she said. That phrase became the center of our lives. How are you feeling today? How about now? Maybe later. Maybe tomorrow. The irony wasn't lost on me. It sat there, between us, unspoken, heavy. For years, I'd been the one postponing. Now the postponement belonged to her body, and neither of us had any control over it. Some days were almost normal. On those days, I felt hopeful in a dangerous way. We'd sit outside for a few minutes, walk slowly to the end of the driveway. I'd talk too much, trying to squeeze meaning into every second, afraid of wasting even a breath. She'd listen, but I could see the effort it took, the way she conserved her energy, like someone rationing water. Other days, She couldn't get out of bed. Those were the hardest. Not because of the sickness itself, but because of what it stole. She was there, but not fully available to the world anymore. Pain has a way of shrinking a person's universe. Everything becomes about managing it, enduring it. I'd sit on the edge of the bed and ask if she wanted to do something. Anything. Watch a movie. Talk. Just sit together. And sometimes she'd say no. Not sharply, just honestly. She didn't have the strength. That's when the guilt really set in. I would think, if I had said yes sooner, if I hadn't waited, if I hadn't been so sure, there would always be another chance. I tried to hide those thoughts from her, but she could see them anyway. She always could. One afternoon, after I'd been fussing around her for hours, she reached for my hand. "You don't have to fix this," she said. Her voice was thin, but steady. That steadiness scared me more than anger ever could have. "I know," I said, but I didn't believe it. I wanted to fix it. I needed to believe that effort could still matter the way it used to. We talked about all the things we'd never done, not in a bitter way, more like inventory. Places she'd wanted to see, small rituals she'd imagined us having, even things I'd never known about, because I'd never asked. Each one landed like a quiet accusation, even though she never meant it that way. She wasn't listing my failures, she was sharing her life. And I was hearing it for the first time when it was already slipping out of reach. There was a day I suggested we just drive somewhere, no destination. She laughed softly. Then she winced, pressing a hand to her side, the laugh turning into pain. "I can't," she said. "I wish I could. I really do." That sentence broke something in me, because it wasn't about the drive. It was about everything she wished she could still do. Everything she wished we'd done when her body didn't have limits. I learned then that wanting isn't enough. Not when the window has already closed. I stayed strong in front of her, or tried to, but alone, I fell apart in small, embarrassing ways. Standing in the grocery store, unable to remember what she liked anymore because our lives had narrowed so much. Sitting in the car, gripping the steering wheel, furious at myself for thinking responsibility was the same thing as love. The cruelest part was this: my intentions had never been better, and they had never mattered less. Love, I discovered too late, isn't proven by what you're willing to do when everything is falling apart. It's proven by what you choose when nothing seems urgent. And I had waited for urgency. There was one night I think about more than any other. Nothing important happened. That's probably why it stayed with me. She was already in bed when I came in. The room was dim, just the small lamp on her side, the light softened by the shade she'd insisted on keeping, even when I said it was too dark. She was lying on her back, eyes closed, breathing shallow but even. I stood there for a moment, watching her chest rise and fall, counting without meaning to. I didn't want to wake her. I was afraid if I spoke, I'd break something fragile in the room. I sat down on the edge of the bed instead. Slowly, like any sudden movement might cost us something. I noticed how thin her wrists had become, how her wedding ring looked loose now. I reached out and adjusted the blanket, more out of habit than necessity. She opened her eyes. "Hey," she said. Her voice was barely there, but she smiled, that same small smile she'd always had. "Hey," I said back. I almost said more, almost filled the silence with words the way I usually did, but I stopped myself. I took her hand. It was warm, lighter than I remembered. She didn't squeeze this time. She just let her fingers rest in mine. That felt like permission. We stayed like that for a long while. No talking, no plans, no apologies, just breathing in the same rhythm, or close to it. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator down the hall. A car passed outside. Life going on, indifferent. At one point, she whispered, This is nice. That was it. That was all. Not I love you, not I'm scared, not I wish. Just that. And I understood then that this quiet, this closeness was what she'd been asking for all along. Not trips, not grand gestures, just presence. Just me, fully there, without checking the clock in my head. I wanted to freeze that moment, stretch it, live inside it longer than time would allow. Eventually, her breathing deepened, and I knew she'd fallen asleep. I stayed there anyway, holding her hand, afraid that if I let go, the moment would disappear completely. Some things don't need to be said to be understood. Some things, once understood, can't be fixed. It took me a long time to understand what I'd actually done wrong, longer than it should have. For a while, I thought the mistake was the trips we didn't take, the places we never saw. Scotland became a symbol in my head, a stand-in for everything I'd delayed. I kept thinking, if only we'd gone, as if geography was the problem. But lying awake one night, staring at the ceiling, it finally settled into something clearer, heavier, harder to escape. She wasn't asking me to take her places. She was asking me to choose her. Again and again, in small ways, she had put herself in front of me and said, "Do you want this moment with me?" And I had answered by looking past her towards some imaginary future where I'd be more available, more relaxed, more ready. I kept thinking love was about intention, about meaning well, about knowing, deep down, that I cared. I didn't realize that love, to the person on the other side of it, is measured in decisions. Not thoughts, not plans, decisions. Here's the truth I learned too late, and it's not complicated or poetic. It's almost embarrassingly simple. Love isn't built on what you plan to do someday. It's built on what you choose to do today. I never chose badly in big ways. That's what makes this hard to explain. I just kept choosing later, and later always felt harmless, reasonable, safe. But later has a way of piling up. It becomes distance, then habit, then silence. I think that's why she never pushed harder. She wasn't testing my endurance. She was watching my priorities, seeing where she landed when there was nothing dramatic, forcing my attention. By the time I wanted to prove something, there was nothing left to prove. My urgency arrived after her energy was gone, after her body had closed ranks around survival. She once said to me, very calmly, "I didn't want you to do things for me because you felt bad. I wanted you to want to." That sentence still finds me when I least expect it. In the car, in the shower, standing in line somewhere, watching couples talk to each other without really listening. Wanting matters, choosing matters, and they matter most when nothing is on fire. If you wait for life to force your hand, you've already waited too long. I didn't lose my wife because I didn't love her enough. I lost her because I loved her passively, comfortably, as if love were something that could sit quietly on a shelf until I had time to deal with it. Some lessons don't arrive gently, they arrive late, and they stay. I don't say all of this because I think I have some special insight now. I don't. I'm not wiser than anyone else. I'm just someone who ran out of time before he ran out of excuses. Most days, I still catch myself doing it, saying later, assuming tomorrow will be easier, calmer, more convenient. Old habits don't disappear just because you understand them. Sometimes I think about how many moments I let pass because they didn't feel important enough at the time. They didn't announce themselves as milestones. They didn't come with warnings. They just showed up quietly and waited to be noticed. And I didn't notice. I wonder how many people are doing the same thing right now without realizing it. Sitting across from someone they love, half present, telling themselves they'll make it up later, that they'll pay attention when things slow down, when the pressure lifts. when life finally gives them permission. So I find myself asking questions I wish I'd asked sooner. When was the last time you said no to something small? Not because you couldn't do it, but because it didn't seem important enough in that moment. And if you're honest with yourself, painfully honest, how many of those small moments have you already forgotten, even though they meant something to the person who asked? I don't ask those questions to make anyone uncomfortable. I ask them because I know how easy it is to live on autopilot, to confuse being busy with being present, to think love will wait patiently until you're done with everything else. It usually does, until it doesn't. After she was gone, people kept asking me if I was okay. I never knew how to answer that. Okay felt like the wrong word. Too clean, too finished. The truth is, I wasn't broken in a dramatic way. I still woke up, still ate breakfast, still went through the motions of a normal day. Grief, at least mine, was quieter than I expected. It showed up in pauses, in empty chairs, in moments when I reached for my phone to tell her something and remembered there was nowhere to send it. For a long time, I was angry with myself. Not loudly angry, just this steady, dull frustration that followed me everywhere. I replayed conversations. I edited the past in my head, imagining different versions of myself saying yes instead of later. It didn't help. It just kept me stuck. Eventually, I had to accept something uncomfortable. I wasn't going to get forgiveness from her, not because she wouldn't have given it, but because the chance to ask was gone. That realization hurt more than any argument we'd ever had. So I stopped trying to make peace with the past and focused on something smaller, the present, the part of my life that was still breathing. I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before. Not in a grand, reinvent yourself way, just listening when someone spoke, turning my phone face down, saying yes to invitations that didn't excite me but mattered to the person asking, sitting with people without waiting for a reason to leave. I still mess it up. I still catch myself drifting. But now I notice it sooner. And sometimes that's enough. I don't believe everything happens for a reason. I never have. But I do believe we get to decide what we do with what happens to us. My regret didn't disappear. It probably never will. But it changed shape. It stopped being a punishment and became a reminder. A reminder to choose while choosing is still possible. These days, my mornings are slow. I make coffee the same way every day. I stand by the kitchen window while it brews, watching the light change across the yard. Nothing remarkable, no big thoughts. Just noticing that the world is still here, still moving, even without her in it. Sometimes I think about how strange it is that life keeps offering small moments, even after you've failed at the big ones. A neighbor stopping to talk, a phone call I almost ignore, an invitation that feels inconvenient but harmless. I try not to say later anymore, not because I'm afraid, and not because I think I can make up for what I lost. I can't. That part is settled. I say yes now because I understand what those small choices actually are. They're not distractions. They're the substance. I still miss her. That hasn't softened, and I don't expect it to. But I've learned that regret doesn't have to end in bitterness. It can end in attention, in care, in showing up while you still can. If there's any kind of peace I've found, it's this. The past doesn't need me to punish myself forever. It needs me to live differently now. I can't give her the moments I delayed, but I can give the moments I have left the respect they deserve. And some days, that feels like enough.